And I'm going to hand the presentation over to the CEO of the Australian Centre for Career Education, Bernadette Gigliotti.
Thanks, Bryony. Thank you for that introduction, and welcome to everybody in the room. I think I know most of the members that are with us this afternoon, and I'm sure that as we progress through the afternoon, more of our members will join us. So it was great that you've managed to make it here this afternoon. I hope to present for you a bit of information around the work studies curriculum that was launched last year. Part of my role as CEO here at the CEAB was to sit on an advisory board in the development of the work studies curriculum for Year 9 and 10. So I've had a little bit of involvement with Acara for this particular piece of curriculum since 2013. And whilst I'm certainly not an expert in it, I've got a little bit of understanding in terms of how the work studies program has been put together and what the intent behind it has been, and possibly some way forward in the development of potential programs for students using the work studies framework. So we'll just get started, and what I hope to do this afternoon is to cover the intent of the program. What was it that they were trying to achieve in the development of work studies for students at Year 9 and 10 as a national curriculum, and part of what Acara has been designing for all students in core curriculum. I want to look a little bit at the work studies outline. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but I'll just walk you through it. My apologies for those of you in the room this afternoon that have got a good handle on work studies, but I just want to go through and explain to those individuals that are new to looking at the program what's actually there. I'm going to talk a little bit about what is available to you on the website, what's still to come, and perhaps then kick it off with a little bit of discussion, getting people to think about how they can put a program together, or the beginnings, at least the beginnings of a work studies program in their school. These are the topics that I'd like to cover. If you've got anything else that you'd like to ask a question about, just type it into the chat room feature, and hopefully as I go through my talk this afternoon, we'll cover your questions, or we might be able to get to them individually. Okay, so I'll just kickstart with some basic assumptions about the curriculum. The actual intent of this particular study, it was never designed to be compulsory, so it is an elective subject, and I think we need to be right up front with that. Whilst it is available to us to use, it hasn't been finalised or signed off yet, so it's still appearing in a near final stage in a draft format on the website, on the Acara website, and there's quite a bit of support material there for you, but it isn't complete. So I think you need to be very aware of that, particularly for those of you that are perhaps looking at developing a program. It would be prudent to look to see what's on the website at the moment and keep up to date with any changes as they start to appear throughout the remainder of the year, and perhaps be ready to go with it for 2016. But again, it hasn't been finalised or signed off as a complete curriculum yet, but it is available for you, certainly for planning, for trialling, for picking up particular units or particular strands, and developing resources around those strands. Now, the primary intent of work studies was to really get young people to start reflecting on their position in the world of work. This is an applied learning course, without a doubt. The primary function, or primary work preparation, it's a work preparation program, and it's about bringing applied learning into the classroom and having students understand how their values, their learning, their knowledge translates into workforce capability. So we need to be very, very clear on that. Whilst there are elements of career development in this particular study, the focus is around applied learning. So the Australian curriculum at years 9 and 10 aims to ensure that students develop a knowledge of the world of work and the importance of lifelong learning. It aims to look at their capacity to manage their career and to manage the change element involved in that. And that's a very heavy focus at year 10, how students manage change and transition in uncertain and changing futures. It embeds within it a literacy, numeracy, ICT and interpersonal skills for work, and it looks at how people interact and communicate successfully in diverse work contexts. So it's it looks at appropriate behaviours and protocols. There's a strong workforce development focus right throughout the course. So whilst, yes, you can map what you're currently doing possibly in your career education programs to the second strand, which is around career and life design. The first strand within this curriculum, many of the elements are not new, but are focused heavily on workforce development and workforce preparation. It looks at building skills and resilience to meet the demands of present and future learning in work. And it is a forerunner curriculum to the VET programs in the senior curriculum. So if we try to look at it, if you like, as a bit of a foundation or a platform in exposing students to applied learning in year 9 and 10, so that they've got some context and understanding about the industries that perhaps they're going to select from in their VET programs in the senior final 2 years of schooling. The work studies curriculum aims to build knowledge and understanding and skills of students to prepare for and manage the world of work and life more broadly. They've embedded a lot of work-related learning, authentic experiences and contemporary workplace employment issues are supported through the interrelated elements of applied learning. A strong focus on designing the delivery of this curriculum using workplace problems and having students in groups work together to consider an issue that might be presenting. So last night on the news, there was an announcement about the closure of the shipbuilding industry in Williamstown in 2016. So there's a critical workforce issue in relation to how do people make a transition from a sector that is about to close and all those transferable skills. So taking an industry project like that, building some of the components, certainly the year 10 curriculum around that issue, and then having the students work on that. What are some potential solutions to this very large looming issue of the redundancy in a large shipbuilding industry. So there's a heavy reliance on partnerships between schools, local businesses, community organisations and industry, and this is fundamental to providing successful outcomes for students undertaking work studies. The diversity of schools or local economies, workplaces and industries across Australia will require schools to customise work exposure opportunities for students. And there's an array of work-related programs that can provide a segue into forging such relationships. Now, whilst work experience or industry immersion is not compulsory, it is strongly recommended, and in fact I don't know that you can deliver this course unless you've got a work experience program of some description built into the delivery of the strands. It wouldn't really contextualise the learning very well for the students if it is delivered outside of some form of work experience program, or at least industry immersion, where you're providing opportunities for students to go out of the classroom and engage directly with industry. there isn't a great deal of resources that have been developed yet for you to simply go to the website and pluck out a lesson and give it to a teacher to deliver. You will not find that. Okay? What you find, however, is some very, very robust frameworks for you to start with, and certainly for you to have a professional conversation with your colleagues. I can see merit in groups of teachers forming a little network, and perhaps with the CEAV coming out to help guide you in some structured activities, having an opportunity to sit down and investigate the best delivery model for this particular curriculum. But there is a very strong focus on work engagement and looking at workplaces, learning about protocol, learning about workplace culture, identifying what does and defining what does workplace culture actually mean in Australia and for Australians. Okay. So what is it that you actually you see here in work studies at Year 9 and 10? Again, it is a curriculum that's been designed to be offered at Year 9, and then a slightly more sophisticated and perhaps a little bit more complex delivery at Year 10. But basically both levels are exactly the same in terms of strands. There are two strands that are delivered. The first strand is called Skills for Work and Learning, and the second strand is called Career and Life Design. Now, for those of you that are familiar with some of the work of Jim Bright, you'll have heard that term, life design. Professor Bright was one of the advisors on the development of the curriculum, so that term is coming through. So perhaps this is something that as career practitioners you'll need to define for teachers within your school, and certainly you can't just hand them this curriculum and say, here you go, off you go and deliver this. It really does require a fair bit of unpacking and mapping towards what is currently being delivered in the school. So there are two strands that need to be delivered: Skills for Work and Learning, Career and Life Design. Both of those need to be delivered at Year 9 and then again at Year 10. To successfully complete the course, the students then also need to complete the 6 sub-strands that form the curriculum at Year 9, and the titles are exactly the same at Year 9 and Year 10. So for the sub-strands in Skills for Work and Learning include learning to work, learning to learn, work skills, entrepreneurial behaviour. Now you'll see here a really strong focus on work. And that was designed primarily by the industry people that sat on the advisory committee. There was a strong push from industry to try and build into school curriculum an understanding of workplace culture and workplace expectation. The frameworks that we use to underpin many of the elements in these sub-strands have come from the Core Skill for Works framework, from the Australian Blueprint for Career Development. Both of those frameworks were used in the development of the strands and the sub-strands. In the second set of strands, Career and Life Design, this is where we start to see more of the career development that we're familiar with. So there is career development and management, the nature of work, and gaining and keeping work. So at both Year 9 and 10, the students complete both strands and they work through the sub-strands at both of the strand levels. And once they're completed, then they've completed the course. And we'll have a look at some of the level descriptors that go with each of these as we move forward. So I'm happy to take a question from the room if there's any questions so far. Okay, So we'll just keep moving forward then. All right, so how is the curriculum organised? Now, apologies for the flow chart, but it's a little bit difficult to read. I'll go through it for you. One thing that is really core to all Acara curriculum is that the student learning experience is paramount. And in this particular course, and that's what it is, in this particular course, understanding of work and self is critical to underpinning all the substrands that have been designed. So at some point, the school that is designing a program needs to pay attention to how they unpack values and how students consider their place in the world of work, but also what they value and what their value sets actually are. And that needs to be articulated in some way. So understanding work and understanding self underpin the rest of the curriculum. You then have skills for learning and work, and you have career and life design and work. So that on the next level down are the two strands. And work exposure and applied learning are critical to both of these strands. I said at the beginning that I really cannot see how you can deliver this program without some form of structured work experience core to what is being delivered. Now, those work experiences don't have to be in the traditional mode where the student goes out for a block of time. The work experience could be an excursion, it could be industry coming to the school, it could be a group of students participating in an industry-based project. There are lots of ways that the exposure to work can be designed. Trial a trade, taster programs, all of these are good avenues for exposing students to a variety of work opportunities. But if whatever can be delivered in the workplace as authentic learning, this is what the curriculum is pretty much demanding of the program that's being designed. So under skills for learning and work, there are three areas that must be covered. Learning to learn. So there's a lot of a focus around how students actually learn, identifying their learning style. This again then is linked to their preferred model of learning at the higher education level, whether that be a vet course, higher education or on the job. So learning to learn, what does that involve? And then the element of lifelong learning. So the continual upskilling that is required of the 21st century workplace. Work skills, actually identifying what the skills are that are required for different occupations comes into play in this first skills for learning and work, and then being able to apply those skills to a problem. That's why it's so important that whatever is designed is actually designed around a real work scenario. And of course there was a big push in the design of this curriculum around entrepreneurial behaviours and actually being able to be self-directed. Probably for many students a difficult concept to embrace at Year 9. I think the intent here was that entrepreneurial behaviours would be introduced at Year 9, perhaps as a group or a collaboration with entrepreneurs, and then at Year 10 the students are older and they're able to actually demonstrate some of those entrepreneurial behaviours. And then across to the career and life design work, we have career development and management, and that pretty much follows a lot of what about our traditional career development courses were around, recognising the importance of self-awareness in career and life design, sourcing career information, describing the nature of work in Australia. So for those of us that are already running elements of industry and enterprise, certainly that particular subject could also pick up elements of career development and management and the nature of work. And there's a big emphasis on identifying culture within the workplace and how culture can actually impact on the way we respond in our workplaces. difficult concepts for young people to understand, but I think that if they're managed carefully, there are some suggestions and some activities available on Scootle, and I'll refer to that a little later on, where students can actually start to have those open discussions about the place of culture in the workplace and how it affects the day-to-day delivery of people's productivity, and also how it actually designs places where we want to work. So there's some investigation that has to happen around that. And of course, gaining and keeping work. There was a big emphasis on behaviours that encourage positive connections and allowing people to apply for different types of occupations, and not to be discouraged when there's a turn or a change in the environment. There is a huge emphasis on managing change at Year 10. This is something that we are now going to have to deal with as career development practitioners. The norm now appears to be multiple job changes, certainly more underemployment than in full-time employment. And these are issues that the work studies curriculum wants to be brought to the fore for students to have in-depth discussions, debate, and really look at solutions that could drive the future industries in this country. So that's pretty much the curriculum. On top of that, there are also options. And I'll move to those in a moment, but there are option level descriptions, and there are 6 options that schools can select to include within their curriculum. They must complete 1 option at Year 9 and 1 option at Year 10 to successfully complete the curriculum. So, you know, if I'm just counting up the number of outcomes or elements under each of the substrands, and at Year 9 there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 substrand elements that need to be delivered. You can see that it's really quite a robust course, and at Year 10 there's 20. So there's an additional substrand there that needs to be delivered. So it's not a course that you would go into simply to say, I'll pick this one up off the shelf and I'll run with it. It will require some careful planning and thought. Now, with the general capabilities, language or literacy, numeracy, ICT skills, personal development are also part of the work studies curriculum, because it follows the format for all Acara core subjects, and those general capabilities are sitting within the work studies curriculum as well. The difference is that these general capabilities need to be linked to workforce, and that's where the examples that are used, the opportunities that are used, must have their embedding within workforce development. Okay, so let's just have a quick look at only one of these 19 content descriptors for Year 9, and I'll start by trying to decipher for you what's on the screen. So you'll see there that reading from the top left, and I'm just wondering if I can use one of my little icons. Here we go. So reading from the top left, you can see here that this is work studies at Year 9, skills for learning and work, so that's the strand, and then the substrand is learning to learn, and the little code that's next to it is simply the Acara work studies core learning. And this is one element within that substrand. So the content descriptor suggests that students need to outline how past learning experiences influence attitudes towards and outcomes of learning. And to actually be able to deliver that, students need to be able to elaborate. They need to be able to reflect on how their actions and attitudes contribute to past learning outcomes. And directly under here are some icons. These little icons here are pointing to this can be delivered within literacy, within numeracy, or across a number of general capabilities. So what the Acara designers are suggesting here is that you can take this content descriptor and you can elaborate by using some of the features at the bottom here in different ways. So you can determining what personal actions and attitudes are most effective in supporting learning and reflecting on how they might use their knowledge of self to understand how to learn more effectively. So the elaborations form part of the delivery of the lesson, if you like. Okay, so this would be your lesson aim, outline how past learning experiences influence attitudes towards and outcomes of learning. And then these would be the elaborations within that lesson. And you can elaborate by using written tasks, by using mathematical examples, or through experiential learning, okay, and getting students to work in groups. Now there's some definitions of terms as well under attitudes and learning outcomes, so how students perceive themselves and how they respond to their own learning. And there are some resources on Scootle. Now Scootle is part of Education Services Australia. It's an online education resource. You just register for it, it's free, and you're able to go in there. What you will find is not exact examples to deliver this particular element, but you'll find some support materials that perhaps can be adjusted, can be used as part of the lesson plan. I think that it's important that you become very familiar with the way that the curriculum is written. You're delivering, I suppose, learning outcomes are your content descriptions. Your elaborations form part of the delivery of the lesson and what you're trying to get the students to achieve. At the end of Learning to Learn, this substrand has 5 descriptors which need to be delivered for the students to successfully complete the core substrand. So you can see here that I would anticipate that this would probably take you know, at least 30 to 35 minutes to discuss, have a bit of a robust conversation with the students. There would need to be some form of definitions and terminology around definitions around the word attitude and what that means and how attitude influences your behaviour towards learning. All of that would have to be done as some form of pre-teaching before the students are then given a task in which the elaborations can be successfully completed. And that is what forms part of the achievement standard. And I'll go on to that in a moment. But I'll take any questions if anybody has any questions at the moment. Perhaps you can give me a smiley face if you're still with me and I haven't lost anyone yet. Okay, that's good. Terrific, that's good to see. Okay, so if we just look then at this learning to learn substrand, within that substrand, students outline how past learning experiences influence towards attitudes towards and outcomes of learning. They need to be able to describe the implications of individual learning preferences for learning at home, in school, in work, and in the community. So again, this would take, I would think, a 40 to 50 minute lesson where there's some pre-teaching, where examples of learning at home, where students are able to come up with some solutions for that. They could look at distance education and why it's used. And then, of course, work in the community and how people learn in adult community education centres, connecting up with a Learn Local, having an adult that's continuing their education in the community rather than in a formal institute, talking to students, and then some sort of explanation or elaboration. Each one of these elements has a series of elaborations that goes with it. So identify the attitudes and skills required for self-directed and lifelong learning. Explain the importance of active and lifelong learning for personal and community development. Plan and implement strategies and processes to improve their learning and enhance the potential to realise their aspirations and personal well-being. So these are concepts that are quite sophisticated and require the students to consider, perhaps in the past they may not have done this, but consider their own attitude towards learning and then apply that as an ongoing thing towards future study and, of course, employment. How do we do this? How do we then get the students to elaborate? Whilst the curriculum is provided, and certainly the elaborations are provided, the content or the lesson plans have been left to the schools and the practitioners to design. This is something that has to be designed by yourselves, and also that's why I suggested earlier on that perhaps teams of teachers or practitioners can work together to come up with the content or the examples or the projects. A little later on I'll talk a little bit about where I would start if I was in the school and I had to look at this. How would I, and perhaps the curriculum coordinator makes a decision and says, right, we're running with work studies next year and it's your baby, you need to get this off the ground. Where would I start? Because I know when I first looked at this, it is incredibly sophisticated. I think it's a very good curriculum. It's quite robust. But in terms of how we unpack it and where do we start, I've got some ideas, and I'll be interested to see what other people would suggest as well. Okay, so that's just one of the 19 elements, if you like, in the skills for learning and work and the career and life design management strands. But let's move to the next one. So that's what we're delivering in the class. What are we then assessing against? And this is the bit that hasn't actually been completed yet. So by the end of year 9, I've only given you 3, but in actual fact, I'm going to read out what the students have to have completed to successfully achieve year 9 work studies. By the end of year 9, students, and of course they have to provide evidence of this, need to understand the importance and components of self-directed and lifelong learning. They investigate the skills and personal qualities associated with a range of occupations and explain the importance of teamwork and collaboration. They identify the types and purposes of communication in workplaces, including social media. Students understand entrepreneurial behaviours and their importance for work in addressing a range of challenges. They explain the relationships between self-awareness and career planning resources. They investigate the changes occurring in work, workplaces and work-related relationships and the factors contributing to the changes. They identify opportunities associated with these changes. Students identify the contribution of diverse cultures to work and workplaces, and they describe formal and informal recruitment processes. Now, that's enormous. What they actually have to provide evidence of to show that they have understood, interpreted, and been able to apply this learning to their knowledge of the workplace. So a portfolio of evidence is going to be critical to the development of this particular curriculum. I can't see how else students are going to be able to identify and demonstrate that they've understood and can apply this learning into a workplace context. Students need to plan and implement strategies to improve their learning and strengthen their individual learning skills. So right from the outset, they have to have knowledge of their own learning skills, be able to map that, and then provide evidence that they've improved through undertaking this particular study. Students research and analyse information, organise teams, communicate effectively using appropriate types of communications in a given context. They propose explanations and predict outcomes. Students practice entrepreneurial skills and attributes, propose actions in response to identified work and community challenges. They research and filter relevant career information resources. Students create career scenarios and identify the skills to manage career transitions. Students collect and evaluate data and information to draw conclusions about changes to work arrangements and their potential impact on their futures. Students synthesize data and information to form reasoned conclusions. And this, of course, is at Year 9. Students present their findings and explanations. So there needs to be a very direct correlation between what they're learning and applying their learning into the workplace, and then demonstrating improvement in their core skills for work competencies across this particular course. So that's the Year 9 Achievement Standard. What we don't have at the moment is definitions of what a student has to do to achieve the standard, or what is considered below standard and what is considered above standard. At the moment, Acara is still working through its trial schools to look at setting the achievement standard. So in a way, we can certainly start doing our preparation, but we don't necessarily have a benchmark of accepted practice as to where the achievement standard falls at the moment. Okay, so I think that the actual intent of this achievement standard is really quite profound, and if a school has the capacity to be able to embed this across disciplines by unpacking some of it and mapping the achievement standard and some of the tasks or some of the elements in the sub-strands across the curriculum, you'll find that it's going to be a very, very rich learning experience for the students, and certainly has the potential to really bring into schools something unique and different, allowing students an opportunity to explore where their futures might lie and make a bit more of an informed choice. Okay, so now a word around the Year 9 options. The course needs to be delivered in its entirety, so you need to deliver skills for work and learning, and then of course career and life design, and the 19 or 20 sub-strands within those two strands. And then on top of that, there needs to be one option completed at Year 9 and one option completed at Year 10. On the screen at the moment, I've only got the 3 showing, and you can have a quick read of those. And at the end of each one, there's a little code there. When you go onto the Acara website, I'm not live at the moment, so I can't connect to the internet. But when you go onto the Acara website, these little links here are linked back to that Scoodle page, but it also gives you a definition of what this particular optional project is trying to achieve. So there's a full descriptor there for you. You can go in and use that as part of your planning. So there are 6 titles for consideration in your options. The first one is a school industry cooperative project. You might already be doing this, so that this would be something that you could actually add in and give some form of formal accreditation to as part of the work studies curriculum. There's contemporary work challenges and opportunities for students to explore. There's cross-cultural enterprise. There's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and work. Option 5 is gender and work. And option 6 is a school-developed option, whereby this option provides students with opportunities to develop their knowledge, understanding and skills in a particular work and career-related area, and to design and develop strategies for effective learning. Students and teachers are encouraged to negotiate an area of content of relevance and interest to them that is either not studied through the other core content or options, or one they would like to explore in greater depth. And some of these examples could include literacy and numeracy for work, community and unpaid work, financial management and work, cultural diversity and work. Now what you need to remember with the options, however, is that you can't do the same option twice. So if you've done school industry cooperative project in year 9, you can't then repeat that in year 10. You need to do a different project in year 10. And if you pick the school developed option in year 9, you can only do it once. So you might consider in your team, if you're developing your program as a school, that you might save your one school developed option for year 10. So you can't repeat it, and that's been done deliberately to try and give the students an opportunity for more breadth in what they're studying. So general capabilities must be identified in each of the content descriptors if you're doing your own school developed options. So it has to follow a similar process to the way that the curriculum has been designed in the achievement standards for the core components. Content descriptions must align with the achievement standards at year 9 and or year 10, and the option must reflect an applied learning approach and provide opportunities for work exposure activities. So you can see there that there's an element of an additional project, and again, the intent is that these options will be industry-based options that involve some form of partnership and negotiation with industry. All right, so that's at the year 9 level. So what do we find at year 10? It goes up a notch, but it's still exactly the same in terms of the way that the curriculum's been designed. The main 2 strands are skills for learning and work and career and life design. So again, at the learning to learn, you'll see here, explain how potential changes in circumstances impact on when, how, and why you might learn. You have to give the students an opportunity to elaborate on this. So once you go into the main curriculum pages, all the elaborations are listed there for you, similar to the year 9 ones, and you need to go through and ensure that students have access to those elaborations and that they've been built into the way that you design your lesson plans. Now there's quite a bit here around self-directed learning, understanding what lifelong learning is about. You'll see there, explain the relationship between lifelong learning and work in the 21st century and its importance for future work opportunities. And it's more than just saying, well, you know, guys, once you finish your degree, you're going to have to keep studying. You actually have to provide them with opportunities to talk to people or to talk to organisations that demonstrate how upskilling is part of the modern workforce. And that will require you connecting with either training organisations or with industry that has on-the-job training and demonstrating how these individuals maintain their currency and their knowledge. And then the students reflecting on that and presenting it in some way. So you can see here you've got learning to learn, career development and management, and nature of work, and so on. And again, the achievement standard, there's quite a few things in the achievement standards that students have to demonstrate. The focus at Year 10 is heavily on change and transition. And students need to be able to discuss in depth what happens when life circumstances change and the flow-on effect of that. So actually embedding this in a business course, this particular component of the Year 10 work studies would be really beneficial. So having an economics course at Year 10 or a commerce course and having looking at how economies change and the impact of that on workforce productivity is one way of delivering some of the achievement standard at Year 10. But heavy emphasis on entrepreneurial skills and behaviours. What does calculated risk mean? What does project management mean? These are concepts perhaps that in the past we haven't dealt with in schools, but as part of work studies, there is a heavy focus on getting students to understand the language of work. So what's involved in project management, Gantt charts, it's that type of language. What are entrepreneurial behaviours? Who are entrepreneurs? Why are they successful? Why are they not successful? Looking at all sorts of different types of ways of financially supporting new ideas, crowdsourcing, that sort of thing. These are concepts that we need to build into the Year 10 program around work skills and entrepreneurial behaviours. And again, we don't have any benchmarks for the Year 10 standard as yet. So that's the part of the curriculum that hasn't been completely thrashed out yet. We're not sure what is above standard, at standard, or below standard. It's coming, and hopefully in the second half of the year, we'll have clear benchmarks to help us in the preparation of our programs for the Year 9 and Year 10 work studies. Okay, so here are some more of the options available at Year 10. I had split them up because I felt that perhaps these were ones that were a little bit harder to deal with, and they could be projects that could run right across the semester. They could be introduced at the beginning. This is not a lockstep course. That's something else that I needed to mention to you as well, that it's quite possible for you to run your skills and work and learning concurrently with your project options. They're not one or the other. It really depends on the amount of time that you have available and how you're going to design your course. So you might find that if you've got a group of students that you want to start them on a project early on in the course, then certainly you can use some of these options there. Okay, so what is actually available for you? What can you find when you get to the work studies site? The final document is awaiting endorsement, but there's every indication that it will be endorsed for delivery right across Australia. There's been some quite good trials of curriculum and content, and that's what we're waiting on now for achievement standard benchmarks, so we'll be able to have something to look at and say, okay, well, this is where I need to pitch my below standard or my above standard student. But there's certainly no reason why you can't start designing your own your program. The curriculum content is there. So you have your scope and your sequence, and you have your descriptors, you have your level descriptions, your content descriptions, the strands and the sub-strands, and you have your achievement standard. What is the expectation to be delivered by the end of each year level? And it's quite clear as to what should be delivered at Year 9 and what should be delivered at Year 10. You have your option descriptions for your 6 projects. So there's no reason why you couldn't, in the second half of the year even, if you wanted to trial a project option, you could run with it because your descriptors are there. You could use your own achievement standard in your school because you haven't got a benchmark at the moment, but there's no reason why you couldn't still assess against the achievement standards that are listed there. And you have links to the general capabilities and cross-curriculum priorities. So the curriculum as a whole is there. There are some elements missing in terms of the benchmarking of the achievement standard, and there are very, very few samples of units of work. What you have got is some general materials that are currently out there, nothing that you haven't seen before possibly. And certainly those of you that are very familiar with the Australian Blueprint for Career Development, those materials are listed on the Scootle website and links to that. There are a bit of materials from the New South Wales government that's gone up as well, because they have quite a strong work education program. So the material that has been around for a little while is sitting there for you, and you can certainly look at it. But in terms of classroom delivery or completed units of work, they haven't been designed yet, and it would require schools to develop pretty much for the local content for your own delivery. So what's still to come? I've just mentioned to you, we're still waiting very much on units of work. There are some Discover resources available. Creating a portfolio, there isn't an example of a portfolio, but perhaps people have evidence of this themselves, that they've already got portfolios that they're using with students. Many of the units of work, certainly the CEAB resources, would meet a lot of the elements within the substrands. The booklets that we have, again, could be a good starting point for some teachers if they feel that they need to have that concrete example in front of them. There are a number of work studies, materials still to be developed. I'm not sure that anybody is designing materials for the work studies curriculum at the moment, but certainly worth keeping your eye out for that. One thing you can do is identify quite clearly where the work studies curriculum maps to the Victorian Careers Curriculum Framework quite readily. And if you're already delivering on the VCCF, you're going to be able to map this curriculum quite readily across to what you're delivering in the VCCF. You might find that the entrepreneurial behaviours possibly have a stronger focus in this, and as I said at the beginning, the intent is that this is delivered with a work and workplace experience program embedded within it. So that's probably where the difference is between the two frameworks. Okay, so where would you start? So if you're being given the job of putting work studies into your curriculum next year, and your curriculum coordinator said, right, we're going to give you a period a week, you've got a 50-minute lesson once a week for the whole of the year, you're to deliver your career education, where would you start? The first thing I would do is I'd sit down with the actual Acara strands and substrands. It's a one-page A4 sheet. We'll make sure, Bryony, can you make sure that this goes up on the website on the CEAB Member Lounge along with the recording? We'll have a link to the one-page Work Studies Year 9 and 10 scope and sequence. I think you start with that and you map to what's currently being delivered in your school already. You may find that the skills for work and learning, work skills, learning to learn, is already being delivered possibly in some of the professional development curriculum in your school. So see if there is an alignment. Start with that. And then consider the career and life design particularly if you've already got some career education happening in your school, because in the second strand, career and life design really does map across to the VCCF quite nicely at Year 9 and Year 10. So it wouldn't be a quantum leap for you to identify some delivery of learning outcomes that are currently happening today, okay, that you're already delivering, and see where that fits nicely. Then I would review which strand I believe that students would engage with more readily. Now for me, I honestly think that the career and life design is probably an easier strand to, first of all, introduce to students. So some of the learning objectives in the Year 9 program are around career development and management, recognising the importance of self-awareness in career and life design, sourcing career information resources, describing the nature of work in Australia, the implications for current and future work opportunities that could already be being delivered in Year 9 history, recognise the effects of work culture on the ways of working, gaining and keeping work, investigating formal and informal recruitment processes. So some of this could already be delivered. So consider which of the two strands would be not easier, but certainly more readily adapted to your structure, your current structure, and where you think the student's career readiness already is. So you might want to start with that rather than looking directly at the skills for work and learning, and then moving into the skills for learning and work once they've got an understanding of the terminology around career and life design. What does that mean? And then moving towards the skills for work and learning. For me, I'd probably flip it the other way around. I'd look at building structure through experiential learning projects. The best way to deliver this curriculum is really to design it around learning projects. Taking each of those elements, for example, gaining and keeping work, there are 3 elements there that need to be delivered. So taking those 3 elements and arranging them as a task-oriented, if you like, learning project that the students can then work together in teams and then present their findings. Because remember, this is all about the students demonstrating their learning and their understanding by applying it, by showing and demonstrating. So designing some experiential learning projects around 3 or 4 of the elements within each of the little substrands, and then building reflective practice. One of the things that I think a good delivery mode for this course is through journaling. I think if we can get our students to journal, whether they do that via a blog, whether they do it through a written book, whether they do it through social media, but some form of formal journaling where they can reflect on what it is that they've discovered and how they're applying that discovery to their own life. So through journaling, through presentations, through seminars, and then of course through the debriefing, particularly if they're going on site and they're observing industry in action. Now the same applies for Year 10. I think that for those of you that are given the task, you might want to go to your curriculum coordinators and say, let's get Year 9 right. Let's build this into some experiential learning that might already be happening in the Year 9 level. You might have an alternative Year 9 program at your school, and this would be a great program to embed within that and get the students to actually design their professional portfolios around that, and then have a go at the Year 10 one. The Year 10 one it's heavily based on an understanding of core skills for work, and students really need to be able to identify those core skills, show how they have internalized them and how they're improving on those core skills for work to be able to pass this particular course. Okay, so that's, I think, how I would start and I would structure the program. And I thought I'd just finish off by just asking the room, really, how would you take this particular Year 10, Work Studies Year 10 is in Career and Life Design is the strand, the nature of work is the substrand, and here's one of the content descriptors: investigate the relationship between work cultures, work arrangements, and the individual. And this is what they're suggesting will help you to deliver it in your elaborations. Comparing workplace cultures, identifying common characteristics of effective and positive workplace cultures, exploring the implications of various working arrangements such as self-employment, contract work, working remotely on work culture from individual and business perspectives, building scenarios of what work culture and arrangements might look like in the future by examining the factors contributing to their evolution, including the need for sustainable patterns of living, and understanding the personal attributes and dispositions have implications for the right fit within an organisation and future work opportunities. And if any of you participated in the webinar on graduate employment just recently, the top selection that graduate recruiters are looking at as the one thing that will get a graduate a position is cultural fit within an organisation. It's now outstripping communication skills and team skills. Cultural fit is the one thing that is appearing as the competency, if you like, that will select a graduate into a position. So anybody got any ideas on how they would develop this or deliver this particular element? I'm going to open it up to the floor. If you'd like to take the microphone and share with us, that would be great. Oh my goodness, everybody's gone quiet. Come on, there must be somebody here with a microphone that can just jump in and give us a few ideas on how they think they might be able to deliver this particular element in a classroom setting. Let's make it easy in a classroom setting. Okay, so we've got a bit of a content from Mitch. Good on you, Mitch. Thanks. He hasn't got a mic, but he said that maybe get them to do something that looks at the school's culture for year levels and the work arrangement for that year level, and then how that fits with the individual. Yep, that would be a good way to do it. And another way to do it is to get them to run a bit of a survey amongst their peers or older students, or even getting them to talk about with their parents or in their networks, a little survey to find out how important culture is to the organisation, what makes positive culture, and getting them to respond to that, and then feeding their ideas back together in a little presentation. They could even go so far as to build up some scenarios. A little YouTube clip would be fantastic, or looking at YouTube and getting examples of workplace culture that are both positive and negative, and then having a discussion around why culture is so important to an organisation, and having a look at the different types of large organisations. They could look at Qantas. They could look at the cultural fit in small, medium and large organisations. You could get a recruitment company to come in and talk to them about cultural fit. Some of the KPMG, they're very, very good, and they go out to schools and having them talk about what that actually means. Looking in the paper for stories of discrimination or male versus female ratios within the organisation. Great. Thanks, Sarah, for that contribution. That's great. Thanks, Mitch. Sorry, yes, you're a girl. And yet, of course, we could always Google workplace culture. But I think that we can come up with a good range of activities that will allow students to examine what their perspective of the right fit really is. And again, they could even do some personal attributes checklists to see what they have and what they'd like to build up on, and how schools make their places, inclusive. What are some of the inclusive practices that we have in schools and in other sporting organisations that make people culturally feel part of an organisation. So they're all good examples. See which students have already gained a part-time job and their perspective of it, and the positive aspects of culture there and what makes them feel part of the organisation. The big chain supermarkets, I mean, you only have to look at the glossy advertisements for Woolworths and Coles, and they're always smiling and happy. So getting people to talk about their perceptions of those organisations, both from a customer's perspective, but also from an employee's perspective. Okay, they're all good suggestions, but you can see here, guys, that there's a fair bit of work in this. This is not something that you're going to be, it's not a product that is simply off the shelf you pick up and off you go and you run with it. It will require a fair bit of development and activities. But look, for some schools, some of this work could already be happening in other subjects, and it's simply a question of mapping to what's already being delivered rather than starting from scratch. Okay, so just to wrap it up, because I've got to the end of my time and I've got a little bit over, the strands are interrelated. So you've got skills for work and learning, and career and life design are interrelated. So you can start with one, you can start with elements of one and elements of the other and build them up as you go. It provides flexibility and opportunities for teachers to build their own curriculum. There is an emphasis on collaborating with other teachers from other learning areas and to construct integrated units of work incorporating the core and the options. And the strands build sequentially from year 9 to year 10. So, for example, I started out with the first element in substrand, learning to learn, outline how past learning experiences influence attitudes towards and outcomes of learning. That's at year 9, and at year 10, the same element would say, explain how potential changes in circumstances impact on why, when, how, and why you might learn. So it is sequential, and it does build age-related more than anything across from year 9 to year 10. So I hope that that's been helpful, and it's helped giving you some ideas on how the curriculum has been designed, its intent, and a way of packaging it so that it can be delivered. And just bear in mind that it isn't quite finished yet. We're still waiting for the achievement standards to give us some indication as to where we pitch our assessment. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Bernadette. I'd like to ask everyone in the room to join me in a round of applause, thanking Bernadette for that very in-depth presentation on where we're currently sitting with Acara. I'm going to put up the link to the online CEAV evaluation survey, so you can follow that link and provide us with some feedback on the webinars and how you what you were able to gain out of today's session. Our next webinar is on the 20th of August, which is Keeping Out of Court Series 3. For those of you that may not have known, we're running a series with the CEAV lawyers, Minter Ellison, this year, and we're up to our third series. Series 1 and Series 2 can be found in the webinar library. And then we do have a VTAC webinar, which is for the general community and parents on the 2nd of September, and that's on using the VTAC system. And you can book online at the CEAV website for both of those. I'm just going to stop the recording, and I will put up a timer for 1 minute. And once again, thank you very much for attending today.